It all started with this normal, cheap, metal, four-legged side table that we use in our screened-in porch. But it really all started in my backyard, where I cut this mulberry and walnut tree. And I'm super excited to be using one of these cookies that's been baking for a while. I just was begging to cook up a new idea. Coincidentally, I had also recently watched an episode of the Workshop Companion where he made wonky table legs on the bandsaw, and I thought, I just really want to try that, it looks so fun. So I grabbed the cookie, and if you're not familiar with a cookie, it's just a slice of a tree trunk that's sliced as the tree grows rather than sideways for regular lumber. And yep, it was pretty much the exact same size, so now it was time to get to work. I'm using my router sled that I made in a previous video. You can see the link up top, but don't go yet. Check it out after this one. In this project, I really wanted to push myself and try some new techniques. So I ended up doing 5 things I've never done before and making 3 pretty big mistakes. We'll get to those later. And if you want to see if I actually stepped on this table, you'll have to wait till the end of the video. I wanted to really challenge myself on this project, and this is already the second thing that I've done that I've never done before. I'd never flattened a cookie, and now I'm attempting to put in a bow tie, or rather, a bone tie. I had a really great idea that I could get away with not using chisels if I just made the edges curved, just like the spiral bit on my router. Just carve in that shape and then hammer it in, no problem. Well, the first side was awesome. That went fantastic. Almost had it. I was almost done. And then it grabbed. Well, I'm back to using a chisel. And the only problem with that now is that the edges are curved. And so my chisels are not. So I got it as close as possible, not anywhere near perfect, but we're just going to have to make it work. When I originally started making this, I got so excited I thought this may be the top side of this table. After talking with my wife a bit, she really decided that was not going to be the case. So now the third thing that I'm going to do in this project is actually fill this cookie with epoxy. Now I've been working on and off with epoxy for about 1.5 years on most smaller projects. I did do a mantle, which you can see the link for the video up top after you get to the end of this one, of course. But this is the first time that I'm really filling end grain with epoxy, and you can see all those cracks in there. So this is definitely going to be a challenge. But I really like using the tape in just taping up the piece of wood rather than creating a mold that I have to put tape on and then I have to break it out of the mold. Even though this one's not square, it's just a lot easier just to tape it up, and yeah, it's not exactly perfect, but it actually works really well. For this project, I am using tabletop epoxy, so it's a lot thicker, and it's a mixture of a 1-to-1 ratio. so it makes it really easy to use. Now once that dried overnight, I'm gonna just take off the tape and then we're gonna do the other side. Now I think because this thing had so many cracks in it, I actually ended up doing a couple of iterations of epoxy. But you can see here, because I have this router sled, this amazingly awesome router sled, no big deal. I can put as much epoxy on there as I want and remove it with no problem. Now there's still the problem of bubbles and tiny little cracks that I didn't get with epoxy. So I'm trying to fill those with the Starbond medium thick glue, and I really am starting to see why a lot of other people have kind of gone to the wax that you melt in there. It's just really hard to get all the bubbles out. Now I'm making these legs. I want to make the legs about the same size as the other table. This is the method that I saw on the Workshop Companion YouTube channel. I'll link that video down below in the comments so you can see him do a way better explanation of what I could do. The main thing we're doing here is we're creating an ornate leg that's a no-waste leg. So you cut this thing into 4 pieces, put those 4 pieces back together, you get a curvy, just unique, kind of super weird table leg without any waste. Now this walnut, like I said, it came from my yard. So I've got to mill this stuff down and get it to about the right size that I want to use for the legs. I want to get this thing, these pieces square. So I measured the width and then cut that. And that's where I get my pretty square pieces of wood. I'm going to go ahead and run those over the joiner one more time just to make sure everything's perfectly square. Now I did make 5 of these legs just in case I really messed them up, and actually ended up having 2 of them left over. The real secret to cutting these legs is once you get them into 4 pieces, you've got to number the outside. 1, 2, 3, 4 in the corners on the outside, because when we put these back together, we actually want to put them back to where the numbers touch on the inside. I know, it's complicated. I actually had to go back and watch his video twice while I was putting these together, because it was just really hard to get it in my head exactly how they were supposed to work. Now this is definitely an all clamps operation. So I'm just kind of roughing up these edges before I glue the boards together just to get a nice good bond. And yeah, this is literally almost all of the small clamps I had. Once they were dried, once the halves were dried, I ran them back over the joiner again so that I could get a true flat side on each one in order to glue the two halves together. Does anybody else think these kind of look like strips of bacon? Man, I'm kind of getting hungry. Anyway, once again, we're gonna take all of our clamps, try to get this thing nailed down right. Alright, so once they come out of the clamps, they're pretty gross and uneven. But after working on each one for about 15-20 minutes on the sander, they come out nice and smooth. So now that I got my legs and I have my tabletop, not really exactly sure how to get them together. I pulled up the original software that I programmed this design in, and it didn't really give me any clues. But I came up with an idea. I'm going to use this old piece of live edge oak. I'm going to have it kind of help me set the legs in. In order to measure where the legs went, I use a highly technical process called just put it on there and mark it out and see what happens. Like I said before, this mulberry cookie isn't really round. It's more oblong. So trying to get these things in the right place was, yeah, about as accurate as I could get right there. Oh, and I didn't want to hide my bone tie, so I had to make a place to cut that out. Now to get these legs absolutely straight, as in the both ends parallel to each other, so this thing sits flat and flush to the ground, I had to kind of shove some wedges of wood in the sides to make them all seem as if they were flat on the sides. It's really hard to explain, but somehow it actually worked. So now that the legs have parallel sides that are flat to each other, I got to figure out how to get them in this wood. So ideally on a three-legged piece of furniture, you want to have an equilateral triangle so that all points are supported equally. But in this, I had to go with a little bit of an isosceles triangle. So I cut these grooves out for the legs to kind of fit in. And you can kind of see the tables really kind of coming together. So I'm going to draw the squares for where the legs are going to go in the table. And then we're going to go to the drill press and just kind of take out the space where those legs are going to fit. Now I'm back again with the chisel. which I kind of didn't think I was going to use in the first place, but this is a new thing for me too, chiseling out actual areas where other wood sits. I'd never really done that before either. So I decided to go ahead and put a dowel on the bottom of each leg and then drill a hole into those squares to give it some extra support. The only problem is I numbered each one of the squares 1 through 3, and when I went to drill a hole in there, I actually drilled through the numbers. So I had a really hard time getting the legs in the spot that they were supposed to go in. This process here where I actually got it to fit and go in probably took me an hour. Now, if you've ever put in fence posts, this is how you get a fence post level. And I've done a lot of fence posts in my life. So I kind of just went back to making sure each leg was level. And it seemed to work. I put these dowels in the oak to kind of hold it in place. And I don't have a Japanese pull saw, but I do have this jam saw. It's really used for flooring. But it works really well. So I'm going to add yet a third way to support these legs. I'm going to run a dowel on each side of the leg. Cut some spaces in the dowels, that way the glue can kind of move around in there. Now I absolutely wanted to build this project without any screws. And I wanted to make something so good that I actually sort of hate it, sort of like it, just don't really know what to say about it. But the thing that I'm really doing is I'm pushing myself to try new techniques on every build. But look at this thing. It came out, it's perfectly flat. Like, it doesn't wobble at all. I literally just can't believe how between all these surfaces that I had to get planar to each other, that it actually worked. Now this is going to be sitting on our screened-in porch, which will be subjective to the moisture on the outside. So I'm going to put 3 coats of spar urethane, and you can really see how that color comes out. And look at this walnut. Just the fact that that came from my yard and I cut it and had it milled and then used it in a project, it just doesn't get any better for me. Now I am going to add these mulberry feet to the bottom, because on the carpet it was not quite as stable as it was on a flat surface. I was actually going to use these mulberry slices for a coaster, but it turns out even coasters make good feet. Now I have a beautiful table to enjoy every morning before I go to work. And if you want to know if I stood on this table, yes, I did. And it easily supported 180 pounds of American woodworker. If you'd like to help support me in my journey, you can order my stickers down below, the links in the comments.